to the table? Is that nearly right? Thank you. Donald, welcome. You've seen the process. We've got about 10 minutes. We've got your written submission and you can assume that we've read it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Again, my name is Donald Pruggers, and I am a chartered professional engineer that specializes in geotechnical engineering. I am a resident of New Zealand, and I've been in Christchurch here now for nearly 4 years. First, let me state that I personally support the general direction of the legislation with its aims to return to local governance and leadership and the focus on the regeneration of the CBD, the residential red zone in New Brighton. And I'm not going to reread the previous submittal, as I assume you already have it,
Yep.
but rather I'd like to focus and use my time to elaborate on my concern that the structure of the bill will add layers of bureaucracy and government intervention rather than reduce it and direct the leadership of the regeneration to the local community where I feel it belongs. It's interesting to note that by the end of 2015, only 3 of the government's 18 anchor projects have been completed. A number have been canceled. Almost every project has been delayed. Last month, the press reported over 75% of the citizens here in Christchurch feel that there's not a real strong vision for leading the city and the regeneration process here. Last week, as the Treasury report's been talked about before, it came out, it was released that the anchor project delivery appears unachievable and that the overall viability of the projects might need to be reassessed. In regards to the residential red zone program, it was reported that the successful delivery of the project was in doubt and that urgent action was needed to determine whether a resolution could be found. The bottom line is that extensive resources have been spent by CCDU and SARA with only marginal positive outcomes for the city at this point. Accordingly, there's widespread distrust in the government's leadership of the central city and its plans for large parts of the city now owned by the Crown, including lands known as the red zone. In regards to the red zone, it is important to note that the development of this is primarily a large urban planning project, one that needs to be embraced and supported by the Christchurch local community. This process that directs the plan needs to be driven by the local community and not the Crown, because it's the local people here that are going to be living in it and residing in it and will be here for the next years to come for our children. On that topic, I have firsthand knowledge where capital, resources, and technical knowledge were squandered on at least one of the key anchored projects because of the SARA-led process that was utilized for tendering. As a result, there is a reluctance from the purse string holders of capital and resources to speculate and apply resources to develop plans that may just be shopped around. This opinion was reiterated in the referenced press article on the Treasury report, where I believe it was City Councilor Mr. Lonsdale was quoted as saying, "The private sector has decided to crack on in some cases, even though these anchor projects are slow to get out of the ground. But there's a large chunk of investors who won't do anything until the anchor projects are underway." I am personally familiar with tried, tested, and proven processes to transfer public land to private development interests that partner with local governments to plan, develop, and build successful local communities. There's a significant investment of time and money involved in developing master plans in collaboration with the community that also works financially. And that's why only sophisticated, experienced, financially capable development company can do it. I really don't believe the Crown can, and I don't believe that federal government should be in the development business. The best way to encourage such development company to invest time and energy and financial resources is to work with the community to develop a thoughtful, broadly responsive land plan, is to enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement that is transparent with a selected developer who has done this successfully before, and there are many successful precedents of this throughout the world. I submit that it would be advantageous to source advice from some of the best companies internationally who are in the business of regenerating large parcels of urban land. While this is a large project for New Zealand, it has been done successfully elsewhere. With the right structure in place, utilizing these or similar processes will provide the private investment the necessary assurances to invest and develop the necessary master land plan that is required for the successful development of the red zone and New Brighton and other parts of the central business district. And these are plans and everything that the citizens of Christchurch will embrace because they'll be engaged in the process. I feel it is imperative that the Regenerate bill be structured to encourage this level of partnership and not get bogged down in the business as usual procurement processes that have been used currently, that Sarah has utilized, and as a result, there's been many delays in the anchor projects. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Paul Fosterville.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your thoughtful presentation. You said that the Crown shouldn't be a property developer. I tend to agree with you, but don't you think in this particular instance, in spite of reluctance, the Crown is obliged to have involvement in those major anchor projects, given the wider population of New Zealand are providing a lot of the funding for that?
I guess where I'm coming from with that is that members of the Crown are not land planners. They are not, they don't necessarily truly understand the purse string processes that deal with land planning and the financial viability of various aspects of projects. And that's why you need to have a development company that works in concert with government to make these plans work and go out and do the successful interactions with local communities to understand their aspirations, to understand what they want integrated in the plan. And then the developer who's used to doing this kind of thing can say, okay, this is what this is going to cost. This is what this will cost. Okay, pick and choose the various things that you want. Because it's a give and take process that has to happen when you do a master land plan like this.
Thank you.
David Parker, and then you should.
Yeah, I've been struck as I walk to and from the hotel that I'm staying in that requires me to walk through the CBD back to Latimer Square. And I've taken a few routes backwards and forwards there that, you know, we've got a wasteland, but we seem still to be, in respect of the CBD area, which seems to me the challenges to that are quite different to the former red zone land, or to the red zone land, and indeed to the New Brighton project, that we still haven't cracked how we're actually going to make progress in the CBD. Mm-hmm. And although you say you make those comments in respect of the red zone land and New Brighton, am I correct to say that we pass this bill and we go forward with the structures that are being proposed and we're still not going to fix the CBD issues?
Well, I think that, you know, early on there was, in reference to the one project that I say I had personal experience with,
Which
one
was?
of the anchor ones, it's this convention center.
Yeah.
Consortium that I was involved with that, part of the process with that was basically to master plan the entire northern half of the CBD as part of the convention center deal. And it wasn't just to provide Christchurch with a big building that people could come and collaborate at in the convention center, but it was an integrated process to look at the whole thing and make it, to bring it all together and get the aspirations of the community involved as well. But to master plan that whole thing, rather than just plunk a building in a hotel and call it a day. Yeah. And that got shopped around, and the consortium dropped out, like the 4 of the 5 dropped out, and you ended up negotiating with one. And that's the reference that I'm making to. But yeah, I agree, there's lots of empty space out there, and this all has to be integrated. New Brighton cannot be done by itself, because development money that wants to go to New Brighton is going to look and say, okay, what are all the people going to have to drive through to get there? And am I going to invest millions of dollars into New Brighton and not have, and basically have nothing in between? And same with Christchurch Central Business District. It all flows together, so this has to be thought out.
Well, given that it does have to be thought out, if the proposed structures that we're looking at under this bill for these Regenerate Christchurch plans aren't the appropriate mechanism, what is?
Well, I think right now the structure seems to, you've got a veto power, you've got Crown going to kind of, I see it as almost kind of ride rule over this, probably use the same procurement processes as before, and people are going to, outside investors are going to be reluctant to come in. I think we need to open it up and force it more to get more public involvement.
So you're actually talking about the councils and various submitters have come along and said, well, look, you know, ministers shouldn't have rights of veto in respect of regeneration plans. But what you're talking about is actually the process that the Crown uses in respect of the Crown contributions to these anchor projects, which is the process that they use through Crown Co to presumably liaise with the Regenerate ChCh plan that's been written for the CBD area.
Well, I don't think that it hasn't worked is what I'm trying to say. The process right now, the current process that Sarah has, hasn't really worked, and it seems like this bill is just a regurgitation of that same process.
Okay, so given that this bill's going to go through in similar form to that which it sits now in all likelihood, if you were advising those who take power under these structures that are being legislated through this bill, how would you achieve the outcome that you want, and could you achieve it through those structures?
I think it needs to have less Crown involvement than it currently has. It shouldn't be, the Crown needs to basically, they've got the land and they've got some money and resources and they can use their power to help force things to happen, but they shouldn't be the decision makers, the final decision makers on this.
So who should be?
I think it should be pushed to the local communities and then eventually whoever they bring in as the developers to help plan this thing.
Last quick question, Eugene.
Thank you for the submission, because you've raised a lot of issues in a very thoughtful and interesting way. Is there, I think what you're asking for is an ability to do these master plans for particular areas. Is there legislation overseas that has a good concept that we could look to include some of the elements in this bill? Because at the moment there's no provision under the Local Government Act or the Resource Management Act for really doing, I think, the master plans that you were talking about.
I don't think that there is the way it currently is structured, and that needs to be done. It needs to be, and to do it properly, you need to engage the community and get their aspirations and their needs and their desires, and there needs to be a process to incorporate all that into it.
Can you give any jurisdictions overseas? You said you've been involved in a number of projects. So.
Yeah, basically in San Francisco there has there's been military bases that have closed, and those lands have been somewhat blighted, which granted for different reasons than earthquakes, but still they're blighted. They're oceanfront or waterfront properties. They have similar soil conditions that we have here in Christchurch, where we have liquefiable soils and soft materials. And these developments are of similar size as what we're talking about here in terms of land mass. And the process is that the federal government owned the land. Through a process that I talked about here, they transferred that land to the local government, who then partnered with a developer, and then they generated a master plan for that development, and now it's gone forward.
Thank you.
Don, thanks very much. Useful submission. Appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Thank you. Oscar.